Kamala Harris is like a jukebox with 6 bad choices. I mean, really bad choices, maybe only 3. Her interview with Oprah yesterday, astonishingly terrible. To join me in reviewing, fairly of course, that sit-down Ben Domenech, editor-at-large of The Spectator, Fox News contributor, and our Friday wrap-up guest. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Hugh. I'm told that, unfortunately, I'm going to be experiencing some brain damage in this segment, but I'm ready to try to take it.
All right, let's just play the first clip. Have you seen the whole thing yet?
No, I have not.
And Kamala.
I've seen 2 clips, but that's
all right.
it. So
I'm going to hit you with
more.
the big close. Cut number 35.
We love our country. I love our country. I know we all do. That's why everybody's here right now. We love our country. We take pride in the privilege of being American. And this is a moment where we can and must come together as Americans, understanding we have so much more in common than what separates us. Let's come together with the character that we are so proud of about who we are, which is we are an optimistic people. We are an optimistic people. Americans, by character, are people who have dreams and ambitions and aspirations. We believe in what is possible. We believe in what can be. And we believe in fighting for that. That's how we came into being, because the people before us understood that one of the greatest expressions for the love of our country, one of the greatest expressions of patriotism, is to fight for the ideals of who we are, which includes freedom to make decisions about your own body, freedom to be safe from gun violence, freedom to have access to the ballot box, freedom to be who you are and just be, to love who you love openly and with pride, freedom to just be. And that's who we are. We believe in all that. And so this is a moment where we stand knowing what we are fighting for. We're not fighting against. It's what we're fighting for.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Vice President.
All right, people drove off the road there, Ben. What'd you...
Oh, my God. I'm sorry. If this was perhaps a 3rd grade presentation, then you would give the kid a nice pat on the head and a nice B and say, all right, Sally did her best, and then just try to move on. It's just to hear her try to turn this pablum into some kind of inspirational moment time and again is just, it's so cringeworthy, Hugh. I mean, I just can't look. You've written speeches. I was a speechwriter. This is the sort of thing that, we deal with, as when it comes to kind of the lowest common denominator politician. And unfortunately, that's what they have right now and what they're trying to carry things through. In terms of the things that I saw from her, Oprah was doing her best to try to help her along.
Oh, yeah, raft, buoys. She was throwing her, ropes.
Yeah, just like, please, oh my gosh. And it's one of these things where that smart Democrats are looking at this situation and they're like, oh my gosh, did we make a mistake? Was Joe really losing by that much? And of course we know that, yes, they had to make a change, because literally yesterday he's saying he's never spoken to Jerome Powell since becoming president, when he's obviously met with him multiple times. And so it's a situation where they had to make that change, but to do it with this candidate who has time and again proven that she is just not up for the job. Oh my gosh, it's so cringeworthy.
I actually feel their pain. I have never met or spoken to Mark Robinson. He is a nightmare, right? He's an on-fire, crashing-to-ground candidate in North Carolina who ought to have been vetted and wasn't, and he's going to lose and should. I hope he withdrew last night. I haven't seen a headline to that extent, because he was obviously a porn addict and obviously weird. So I'm glad, but I have a sixth sense about people, right? I don't put them on the air. I know not to put some people on the air. And the GOP in North Carolina must feel like the Democrats nationally. They're
Well,
stuck.
I think one of the things that you see, though, with Kamala is, and I think that it's such an illustration this week when you have the competing endorsements, and I do mean endorsements because the Teamster non-endorsement is an endorsement.
Yes, of Trump.
The competing sort of situation of the Teamsters not endorsing, for the first time since 1996, and not endorsing the Democrat for the first time since 2000, when their members, when polled, were showing overwhelming shifts away from having, a majority of support for Joe Biden to a much stronger majority support for Donald Trump, versus Kamala putting out these 100-ish names from the foreign policy NatSec establishment, including a couple of people who signed on to the Hunter Biden letter, and people who have frankly, been not vindicated by history in terms of their policy positions. That to me is really the story of this election. She is such an inside candidate, teacher's pet kind of person who was able to climb up by dint of her connections, by dint of leaning into all of the different DEI, race component kind of things that were going on within the Democratic Party when Joe Biden locked himself into a corner by saying that he, had to name someone who looked like her as opposed to naming who he wanted to, and Amy Klobuchar, who, by the way, whatever you think of her politics, is not someone who would go on air and say that kind of pablum, because she has an actual, brain cell inside of her head. But it's one of these things that I think is really an indictment of this whole elite structure that promotes people who simply have not earned it by dint of any kind of policy success, any kind of leadership, anything that would actually prepare them for the job of being commander-in-chief.
Now, I have another clip for you.
Go ahead.
I've got to play you another clip, but I want to note, the Republicans have nominated bad candidate. Christine O'Donnell in Delaware years ago, like Mark Robinson, North Carolina, terrible. Richard Murdoch, Indiana, years ago, terrible. We do this. We nominate terrible candidates, too, we being Republican. But she's a terrible candidate, but she came out of California and was protected by bubble wrap in the Bay Area. Listen to this about guns, cut number 32.
I thought it was so powerful at the convention when you said you have guns. No, at the debate.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
Yes. I hear that.
Probably should not have
Domenech, if someone goes in my house, they're getting shot. Your reaction to that?
Well, I just think, look, she's trying to play this game here of saying to people what she thinks they want to hear. And, the idea that she's going to shoot anybody who goes into her house. Of course, she's surrounded by, you said bubble wrap, but she's surrounded by Secret Service. So I guess we should probably say at this stage, that's probably not that great of a thing.
I did say that, yeah.
But it is one of these things where she doesn't actually know how to communicate and to connect with real people. So much of her narrative is about, I'm a real person. I come from this. I come from that. I have a middle class background. All these, the McDonald's thing, which is obviously the Free Beacon says that's in dispute. But it's designed to sort of use narrative to cover up for the fact that she doesn't have any connection to the real world. She doesn't. She's been completely separate from it for so long, and she's had this career where every door has been opened for her in order to get ahead, despite the fact that she doesn't have the kind of resume and the kind of success that you would need to have in order to get to this point. And yes, one of the things that I think is true is that both parties can nominate bad candidates, okay? Of course, it's not one side or the other when it comes to that. But she is so deeply unqualified for this job at this moment in time, and she's proven it. She's proven it by failing in everything that's been asked of her. The border is obviously the most prominent, but just about everything that she has been given when she was elevated to the vice presidency has been something that she can't point to. And so that's why she's running as if she's a candidate who doesn't currently have the job of vice president. She's trying to run as the candidate of change and the candidate of optimism and hope. She's trying to turn things around and pretend like she didn't have any responsibility over the last 4 years because she's failed every time that she's had responsibility.
All right, I'm going to come back with Ben during the break and talk to him, post it all over at my YouTube channel, and then he'll be back after the break on air across the country. We have to talk about Amber Thurman and the tragedy of her losing her life and whether or not that's the abortion pills problem and whether it ought to be exploited by Kamala Harris. But I've just got to tell you, the New York Times Siena poll this morning is such bad news for Kamala Harris. They have her tied with Donald Trump. They need at least a 4-point lead in the general election polls to win in the Electoral College. I think Trump is going to win Pennsylvania fairly handily. I want to play Kamala with Oprah Winfrey yesterday, the vice president, talking about Amber Thurman, the tragic death of Amber Thurman, 34. Cut number 34, please.
Georgia made national headlines. Amber's case came to light through the reporting of journalist Kavita Sana with ProPublica. And so listen to her story.
2 years ago, 28-year-old Amber Nicole Thurman,
Realize we
medical
had that.
assistant.
Stop that part. We're not going to play the propaganda. Ben, Amber Thurman died because she took the abortion pill, the chemical abortion pill, went to the ER and was not given immediate help. Waited 20 hours, didn't get the D&C. That's why she died. Legal causation will go, proximate cause, probably going to be medical malpractice. The D&C is not illegal in Georgia. What do you make of using Amber Thurman and not, for example, Jocelyn Nungare of Houston, Texas, 12, killed by illegal migrant. Kayla Marie Hamilton, 20, killed by an illegal immigrant in June, both of those in June. Lake and Riley in, of course, Augusta, Georgia. We got to come up with Amber Thurman and exploit Amber Thurman and not bring up any of these young women killed by illegals?
Well, one of the things that I think, you're obviously addressing the hypocrisy of the situation in terms of the lives that they don't want to talk about. But one thing that I hope people understand is that the mistake that was made during the pandemic of really leaning into the idea that these abortion pills are something that can be given, these chemical abortion pills, which are obviously, on the rise and may in fact constitute the majority of abortions that are conducted now, that you could get them without actually seeing a doctor or going in to have anyone evaluate you. That was a major risk factor that the abortion lobby was more than willing to risk lives like Amber Thurman because they want to push the pill on everybody. And the fact is that this is not like birth control. This is not just something that people should be able to access. It's been proven to have very few side effects. This is something where if you get the dates wrong, if you have the weeks wrong, and if you have complications, your life is at risk. And that's the reason that you should only be able to access this under the supervision of a doctor. And that's the kind of thing that the abortion lobby just didn't want to have happen. And so they accelerated this process during the pandemic, and then they made it permanent under Joe Biden. And that's something that is, from my perspective, putting the lives of many American young women at risk in a way that could absolutely be avoided. And yes, to your point, DNCs are not forbidden anywhere in the country. It's something that absolutely is done, when you have miscarriage, when you have any kind of complication along these lines. It's something that is allowed under the law explicitly. It is not something that Republicans are taking away. And Democrats want to play games where any kind of complication like this, they want to point at it and say, this is Republicans' fault, even though there is no factual basis for that whatsoever. And I think that that's something that Republicans should confront head on. It's the abortion lobby that is putting women's lives at risk by not requiring any kind of doctor to weigh in or to have any kind of evaluation, no sonogram, no measure of how far along you are. And that's going to only continue to create stories like this. And Kamala Harris is 100% in bed with the abortion lobby. She is emphatic on that point. And to use this in the way that she is doing is so hypocritical and factually wrong. And I'm sure that no one in the conventional old dying media is going to call her out on it.
Absolutely, they won't. They won't. They absolutely will not. We got to play cut 33. It's 3 minutes and 14 seconds, Ben. I'm sorry, but I got to play it for you. Go ahead. Cut number 33.
When you become president, what would be your specific steps? Yeah, of course. What would be specific steps to strengthening the border?
So it's a wonderful and important question. My background was as a prosecutor, and I was also the elected Attorney General for 2 terms of a border state. So this is not a theoretical issue for me. This is something I've actually worked on. Okay. I have prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. I take very seriously the importance of having a secure border and ensuring the safety of the American people. Sadly, where we are now can be traced most recently back to the fact that when the United States Congress, members of the Congress, including some of the most conservative Republicans, came up with a border security bill. And here's what that border security bill would have done. It would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border. Let me tell you, those border agents are working around the clock. It would have just been about giving them some support and relief, which is probably why the border agents actually endorsed the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl. And I'm looking at people from all over the country here, so I don't need to tell the folks who are watching this what fentanyl has done to families, to kids in our country, and the need to take seriously stemming the flow coming into our country and addressing that extraordinary and tragic issue in terms of its effect. The bill would have allowed us to have more resources to prosecute transnational criminal organizations. And it would have been part of the solution. And Donald Trump called up those folks and said, don't put that bill on the floor for a vote. He blocked the bill, and you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And he has put his personal political security before border security. Because understand, even in the intervening months, what that bill would have done to give support to folks who care about this issue. And this again gets to the point about what does leadership really look like? And is it about you or is it about the people? Right. Is it about running on problems or fixing problems? My work and my career has always been about saying, let's fix problems. Let's address the needs, because we know it's within our capacity to do that.
So to answer Justin's question, now that that bill has gone and hasn't passed, will you reintroduce that?
Absolutely. And when I am elected President of the United States, I will make sure that bill gets to my desk and I will sign it into law.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Listen to this.
So, Ben, parachutes in, Oprah, Special Forces gets her out of lands the plane, and it's like airplane. Well, what do you think?
Well, she's just, so your solution is you're going to wave a magic wand. That's what you're telling me. You're going to wave a magic wand, and you're going to eliminate the overwhelming majority of Republicans who didn't need Donald Trump to tell them that this was a bad bill. Look, people can have different opinions about it. I have had a lot of experience working on border-related issues. I've been down there, virtually every year over the past 15 years, and it's one of these things that I, pay a lot of attention to. That bill was completely insufficient in what it would have done. Would it have helped? Yes, of course, because it's something, but it really would not have done any kind of significant stemming of the real problems, which, frankly, this administration is completely unwilling to address. And
Tom Cotton's argued to me, Ben, Senator Cotton has argued it wouldn't have helped. The reason the Republicans rejected it is because it would have codified the asylum policy, which is so bad.
Yeah,
and that
I think that that's a very fair argument. And I think that when I say help, it's more just like the reason that the Border Patrol endorsed it is because it's a resource bill. And so, of course, they're going to endorse anything that has any more resources for them because they need them. But that's something that I think is completely, that was just a fig leaf for this ridiculous policy. She has no solution on this.
Ben, Israel pulled off an amazing thing. It shows us supply chains are dangerous, but also shows us war may be imminent. I want to cover that and the New York Times poll, which has the national race tied. I'm very surprised by that. I thought Harris would be up 2 or 3. So what do you think about the prospect? Do you think, Shabbat Shalom to our Jewish listeners, that by the time they tune back in, there might be a war in Lebanon?
I think there very well could be, Hugh, and I think this is has a serious preview to it. This is an incredible operation. I mean, I'm so impressed that they were able to pull this off, and it's a new, I think, precedent in terms of attacking this kind of low-tech approach that terrorist organizations have been using to get around the technological capabilities of some of their opponents to go after them. And I think that that's something that is really impressive in the sense that, it came out of nowhere, was very effective. And I think, was very targeted. It's very difficult to deal with this in the region because targeting these terrorists, they surround themselves with people in order to effectively create human shields, and then to try to use that blowback against Israel. And I think that this was very targeted. So one of the things that is concerning in this moment, of course, is that we have such a discombobulated leadership in our government. I don't even know how the United States is going to respond to something like this. Certainly I have no confidence in Tony Blinken. I have no confidence that Joe Biden is even aware of what's going on.
Or Lloyd Austin.
Or Lloyd Austin. And Kamala Harris is obviously, just trying to distance herself from Israel, in ways that, has created such of a complete, disaster of a messaging campaign around these issues for the Democrats. So I just don't know how they're going to respond to it. And I'm just hopeful that Israel is able to achieve its ends.
Last question, Ben Domenech. I'm not a prophet, a son of a prophet. My crystal ball is never good. But I think Trump's going to win because she's so bad and his voters are so enthusiastic. And I think, as was on the commentary podcast to say, the Jewish vote in America is beginning to break towards Donald Trump, of all things. What do you think?
Well, I think the Jewish vote is significant, but I also think that the biggest significant factor here is her inability to connect with traditional Democratic groups, voting blocs that she needs in order to win. She needs to match Joe Biden in those blocks, and she really isn't. She's lagging behind in them very consistently in polls, and you don't want to get trapped by getting too heavily into crosstabs, but you can see it playing out across the country as well. And I think that her messaging has been so poor, talking about essentially a care economy instead of industrial policy, instead of manufacturing jobs, instead of the things that she needs in order to hold on to that blue wall. And once that's closed off to her, I think, particularly in Pennsylvania, I just don't think that she has a path. And that New York Times Siena poll that you referenced, you are absolutely right. She should be up by at least 2 or 3 points, and the fact that she isn't should be setting off alarm bells within the Democratic coalition.
She should be begging for another debate. Begging for another debate.
Yes,
but,
absolutely.
I wouldn't give her one. I really wouldn't.
Yeah.
Ben Domenech, follow him on X at B Domenech. Listen to his podcast and read everything he writes at The Spectator. Thank you, Ben. Have a great weekend. The Guardians are in the playoffs, so I'm sure you're happy.
Thank you, Hugh.